y'all doing? Good, good. Hey, so guess what? We live in Guelph now. Hey! Your tap water tastes a little funny. And then I learned that I should drink from the special tap that doesn't go through the softener. So that was a big adjustment. I didn't know what a softener was, but you guys sell them at your Costco here. So anyways, that's been neat. Running through the fountain at City Hall, that feels illegal, but apparently there's signs that say you can, and that's great. Getting ice cream across the street at the sweet shop, anybody like that? Oh, okay, no, never, apparently that's not a thing. We went to Rockwood Conservation, that was pretty sick. Yeah, anybody like Rockwood? Okay, so I have a question. This is really important, and this has nothing to do with preaching, but I'm just gonna ask, because I just need some feedback. We have family visiting tomorrow, and so we've seen Rockwood. We haven't done Guelph Lake yet, so we're like, maybe we should check out Guelph Lake, or should we take them back to Rockwood? So what do you guys think? So if you're like, Rockwood's better, throw your hand up, just give a quick shout. Okay, if you think, Guelph, not Rockwood the town, like the actual conservation area, just to be, okay. There's like a gas station there, right? Like, let's just be real. Sorry if you're from Rockwood. I hear you guys have a police detachment now, which is new. That's great. Okay, anyways, I'm not gonna go down that tangent because we're talking about prison today. Number two, if you think Guelph Lake is better, give a shout. Okay, thanks. We'll be back at Rockwood tomorrow. All right. Yes, and if you're at Rockwood, you'll see me in my new Speedo. No, I'm kidding. That would be awkward. Well, we are... I'm Mark, if we haven't met yet, by the way. If you're your first time at church, and probably your last time now, you have this like mental image in your, okay, anyways. Oh gosh, why don't I ever stick to these things? We are in a series called Follow Me, and it's a really long series. It's going throughout our whole summer, and I'm loving it. And what we're doing is we're basically saying, if we were around 2,000 years ago, and we weren't just reading the stories of Jesus, but we were actually Jesus followers, following him wherever he went, what are some of the things that we would have encountered? What are some of the things that would have been kind of like, oh my gosh, like, did Jesus just do that? Did he just say that? Did he just talk about that? Nobody ever talks about that. Jesus talks about that. So this whole series is kind of an immersion in Jesus culture. And if you're not a Jesus follower, we said this is a fantastic series to kind of creep or stalk Jesus and just kind of like, I'm not sure, but I'd like to know more. Great series to be doing that. And if you're a Jesus follower, I'm a Jesus follower. I've been reading the Bible for decades, and I read the stories of Jesus, and I'm still like, I didn't even know that was in there. I don't even remember reading this, and I know I've read it, but I totally missed this time that Jesus did this wild thing. In fact, last week we talked about something, I was away, we talked about demons, and people were like, we never talk about demons. Jesus talked about demons a lot, and we got lots of questions and clarifications. It's like, that was a lot to try and cover in 30 minutes, and so just chatting with Daniel this morning, he's like, it'd be cool if we could like put out some more resources for that. He's like, because I even felt rushed and didn't feel like I got to do what I wanted to do with that topic and make it really clear. So we're gonna work on that in the next few bits, so keep an eye on your weekly email. If you don't get the weekly email right now, sign up for it. You can use your connection card to do that. And we just love to keep dialoguing. And if there's something that you're just like, I think I'm a bit confused about the whole spiritual realm, and I have more questions than you guys seem to have time to answer last week, or this confused me or anything, feel free to reach out to any of our pastors, or just send your question and email to me. It's jeffgronewald@lakesidechurch.ca. He's not here today, so I can do that. Anyways, so today we're talking about prison, and no, I'm not talking about my personal experiences, Daniel, that's private. But here's the question that we're talking about today, and it's simply this. What do you do when God seems, here it comes. What do you do when God seems silent, absent, and potentially non-existent? What do you do when God seems silent, absent, and potentially non-existent? You ever had a moment where you're facing something with your health and you're wondering, why isn't God helping? You come to the front and they pray for you and you feel like nothing's changed. It's been weeks, it's been months, it's been years. You ever struggle with relationship, either the one you're in or the one you wish you were in, and you prayed about it, and your friend's been praying about it, and your mom reminds you every week that she's praying about it, and the people in her group are praying about it, and you're just like, I'm still single. And this isn't really getting answered. Like, where is God? Does he not care? Does he not want me to find someone? You ever had that moment where you're just like trying so bad to get into a program in school, and you just can't, and everyone else seems to be getting in and you're not? Do you ever have a time where you just so badly, and maybe this is still your story now, wanted to have children? And you talk to people all the time, you're like, yeah, like we weren't even trying, and it just kind of happened, and you're like, I've been trying for years and it just can't. And there's people who don't even want kids and they have kids, and I so desperately want kids, and I've been asking God, and it seems like he's silent and he's absent, and maybe he's not even existent. You ever have that moment where you're just struggling with loneliness? And you're like, I don't understand how I can have so many friends on Facebook and nobody to call when the going gets hard. You ever wrestle with that? You say, God, why am I so lonely? You ever struggle with mental health? And you've seen so many doctors and you've seen so many specialists and you've tried different medications, you just can't seem to figure it out, and you prayed and prayed and prayed about it, and you just feel like God is silent and absent, and you're starting to wonder if he's really. You ever had that? Or how about when relationships go bad and there's lies and there's betrayal and you're just like, I just want the truth to come out and I cannot believe that this is going on for so long, and isn't Jesus the truth, and shouldn't the truth set us free, and why is he not setting me free, and why am I a captive in this situation right now? You ever had that? And you start to think, why is God silent? Why is he absent? And is he even real? And you just think to yourself, you're like, God, I'm not asking for something crazy. I'm not asking for a Ferrari. I'm not asking for a mansion. I'm just asking for enough money to feed my kids and pay my bills. You ever had that moment where you're just like, it's not exorbitant? And you get these people and they tell you these, I was praying for a parking spot and then it just opened up right at the front, and you're like, shut up, are you kidding me? God doesn't listen to my prayers, and mine are actually legitimate. You could walk 10 extra seconds from the back of the parking lot and then no carts would hit your car either. That's my trick. But you ever have that moment where you're like, come on, why isn't he listening? Why is he silent and absent? This doesn't seem to make sense. And so today, that's exactly what we're going to go after. Because I'm going to ask you in a second, you're going to raise your hand. You can take part in this, even if you're not a church person, not a Christian. You're an atheist. You might be about to raise your hand in church, okay? Have you ever felt all across the room like God was silent, absent, or even if you questioned his existence? If you've ever felt that, throw your hand up. My hand's up too. Look around. Keep your hand up. Look around. Almost every hand in the room is up, and the other ones are on Instagram. Isn't that wild? You're not alone in that. That we've all felt like God is silent, absent, or maybe you've actually come to the conclusion that God is non-existent. We've all struggled with that. And so today we're going to go after that with the story, and we're going to go after that as we see an encounter with Jesus that kind of leaves things unanswered. And today is not the kind of message where you leave and you're like, Pastor Mark made everything make sense. It's no, I'm going to pull out some things in the Bible that are going to be uncomfortable and awkward, but it's a hang in there kind of message, not a feel great and rosy kind of message. You okay with that? Okay, 3 people are okay with that. Good. For the 3 people, here we go. It's going to be an encouragement to you. If you want to turn your Bibles to the book of Matthew, and I'll give you the chapter in a moment. Today we're talking about John the Baptist. I don't know if you're new to church or just coming into the series. Don't worry, today will stand alone on its own. You're not in the middle of a movie and missing out, okay? John the Baptist had a famous cousin. Anyone know who that is? Jesus. One person was listening in Sunday school. Excellent. So Jesus' cousin is John the Baptist, and that's kind of cool. And John the Baptist, his parents, before he was born, they had this kind of supernatural encounter, and a prophecy was spoken over them that your child is going to prepare the way for the Messiah, okay? You just imagine, the Jewish people have been waiting thousands of years for a Messiah, and then you get told, hey, your son is going to be the one to prepare people for his coming. And so John the Baptist is kind of this crazy guy. In fact, let me just read from the book of Matthew chapter 3. John's clothes were made of camel's hair. Not the most stylish. He had a leather belt around his waist. His food was locusts and wild honey. Some of you are like, I have an uncle like this, okay? If this is you, I'm not judging you. Just don't put that on your eHarmony profile, okay? It's not going to go far, right? But this is just you kind of like he's a preacher and he's a prophet and he looks like that. Does he even bathe? Who's going to want to listen to him? And yet John the Baptist was really popular. In fact, this is what it tells us, that people went out to him from Jerusalem and all Judea and the whole region of the Jordan. Can you just imagine, from all these places, they didn't get in their car, they walked, and they walked far for this funny looking, maybe unbathed preacher. And it was an interesting preacher because his one message was pretty much, knock it off, which I don't know about you, but if I do that every week, I feel like you guys would stop coming, right? Just stop doing that. Stop doing that. But John was real, and people were drawn to that because they wanted God to do something in the world. He's like, listen, God's coming. And the word he used, it wasn't knock it off, that's my translation. It was repent. It was turn from the life you're living and get in line with what God's doing, because he's about to send his Messiah, and it's going to be awesome. And I think people also like John because he also went after the religious leaders who were a bunch of hypocrites. And he's always like, you're like, you shouldn't name call. Well, the Bible has lots of people who call people names, including Jesus, and John's also one of those people, right? And he gets to the religious people, he's like, you guys are a bunch of snakes. He's like, you guys do all this stuff to look good. You're like whitewashed tombs. And he's like, but you're dead on the inside. There's no fruit to your life. You're religious and you've memorized the entire scriptures, but it's no good because you don't love. And some of you are like, we know people like that. And John was against that. And I think that's why he was kind of popular. Because people were like, this guy's the real deal. He's not here to like sway us with his fanciness and his smooth words. It's like looking at John, he's not there to impress you. He's there to tell you what's real, what's going on, and what God is up to. And he baptized tons of people. It was this ceremonial washing to kind of cleanse them, to say, we're getting ready, we're turning our lives, we're doing a 180. That's what it means to repent. We're knocking it off, and we're getting in line with what God's doing. That was John's job. And then all of a sudden, so we'll skip 2 slides, Jesus shows up. And he comes on the scene, and John's there, and he's just like, this is the one. And he just calls it out. He's like, this is the Lamb of God. This is the one that we've been waiting for. And so he takes all his followers, everyone who's like out to the wilderness to see John, and he just kind of like steps aside and he's like, this is the guy you need to pay attention to. And then this is the story. So then he actually baptizes Jesus. He's like, Jesus, I can't baptize you. Jesus is like, no, from now on we'll do it this way. And so I want to be baptized by you. And so this is kind of crazy, but I love it. As soon as Jesus was baptized, he went up out of the water. At that moment, heaven was opened. Just kind of picture this, okay? It's not normal. And he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting on him. And a voice from heaven said, I don't know what it sounded like. I'm not going to. I always do impersonations of voices, and then I'm just like, this is terrible. So okay, anyway. So the voice from heaven, you just picture the God voice. I'll just talk normally. And a voice from heaven said, this is my son, whom I love. I'm really terrible, but I just picture it was so much more dramatic than that. But anyway, okay. This is my son, whom I love, with whom I am well pleased. Can you just imagine, like, let's just be honest, okay? We're at the river, we're all getting baptized. Jesus shows up. John's like, it's not about me, it's about him. Baptizes him. Then all of a sudden, clouds open, and this voice comes out, and it's like, this is my son whom I love. How many of you have ever thought to yourself, like non-Christians included, right? If I could just see God and hear God, I would never have a problem with believing in God again. You ever felt that way? Like if God would just speak to me, if he would just show me a sign, if he would just reveal himself, then we wouldn't have any issues, but I can't see God. Okay, put a bookmark in that feeling. We're going to deal with it in a few minutes. You good with that? Okay, cool. One person. Awesome. Love it. You guys can interact in the back especially, okay? Word. All right. So here's this moment where he's seen the supernatural. It's awesome. It's okay? And now we don't have time to keep going through the whole story because there's so many details. So I'm going to fast forward again. How far am I going to fast forward? Is that my kid laughing back there? I think it was. Hi, sweetheart. Oh. Okay, I've totally lost myself. Where am I? All right, yes, okay. So then John continues his ministry, except now he's pointing people directly to Jesus because now Jesus is on the scene. So he keeps the same MO, and people come up to him and they're like, hey, John, aren't you feeling kind of jealous? Because now Jesus is getting all the attention. You're John the Baptist, but he's baptizing more people than you. Do you know what they're going to start calling John the Baptist if Jesus is baptizing more people than him? John. Who wants to be John? No offense if your name's John, right? But it's like your entire life it's in your name. You're John the Baptist, but now he's doing all the baptizing. His disciples are baptizing everyone, and you're not. You're about to lose your identity. And John, in his own words, you can read it. Let me just summarize it for you, is like, I'm a hype man for Jesus. My job is to make him great, and I'm good with that. I need to become less. He needs to become more. I need to decrease. He must increase. Maybe you've heard that language. Okay, so that's John the Baptist. He's awesome. Okay, so that's what happens. And then later on, John's still doing his preaching, knock it off. He shouldn't do that. King Herod, you can actually read the history books, real king, marries his brother's wife. Ugh. Let me try that again, okay? King Herod marries his brother's wife. Ugh. I know. Stevens, that was for you, buddy. Okay, anyways, and so in that moment, John's like, you can't have her. You can't do that. It's wrong. And eventually he gets annoyed and he just puts John in prison. Okay? So now John's in prison because he just told one too many people to knock it off. And this is where we pick up the story. You good with that? So here it is. So pick it up, Matthew chapter 11, if you want to follow along, and we'll have it on the screen for you as well. When John, who was in prison, heard about the deeds of the Messiah, because now we fast forwarded and John's been in prison for a while and Jesus is still doing his thing, telling people about the kingdom of God that's to come, doing miracles, casting out demons, telling people things they never understood before and making it understandable. And this is where we pick up. When John, who was in prison, heard about the deeds of the Messiah, he sent his disciples to ask him. Okay, he's like, guys, can you do me a favor? I can't get out of prison. So can you ask him this question? Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else? I just kind of imagine, John's in prison and he's there and he's, having his Sunday lunch with his disciples who came and brought him some snacks and some fresh food. He's like, so what's going on out there? He's like, Jesus, this guy showed up and it was like all this stuff. He cast the demon out and the sick person, he just made them well and he's just doing all these things. And I just imagine like John the Baptist, Jesus' cousin, is starting to feel like, you mean he's doing that for strangers? And I'm still sitting here rotting away in a prison and he's growing his fame? Are you kidding me? And so he asked this question like, are you the Messiah? Like, can you just ask Jesus this? And part of me feels like it was this like maybe passive aggressive comment. Anyone have a relationship with someone who's a little passive aggressive with their questions? Okay, maybe it's just me. In fact, sometimes I ask my wife, I'm like, are you being passive aggressive right now? And she turns to me, she's like, no, that was all aggressive. I'm like, oh, okay. Just clarifying, because I was feeling something. She's like, you should be feeling something. Okay, so anyways, so in that moment, John the Baptist asked the question, like, are you the one that's to come, or should we expect someone else? Part of it, like half of it's like, I think a genuine question, which I'll talk about in a second. The other half is like, he's maybe hoping that the question comes to Jesus, and Jesus is just like, oh yeah, John, of course, yeah, tell him we got him. I'm on my way. I just forgot. Got a little busy with casting out demons and healing sick people and teaching all these people and feeding them and then dealing with you guys, the disciples. Like, he had a lot of excuses, right? But it's not what Jesus says. You just kind of imagine what's going on with John. John, who saw the supernatural, who saw the clouds open and God speak into him and say, this is my son whom I love. And yet he's sitting inside his prison walls. He doesn't see any of that anymore. He doesn't hear any of that anymore. He's in the place where you and I have been when all of life seems to be crumbling around us. When you're sitting in that hospital room for days and weeks and months and you're wondering, God, where are you? When you're lying in bed at night tossing for hours and hours and you just have all this time and you're alone with your thoughts and you're just thinking to yourself, how in the world is this happening? And is God even real and does he even care? And in those moments you're playing it over your head over and over and over again. The house is empty because the kids are at your ex's place and you're just like, how did I end up in this place? And you're alone in your thoughts, you're alone in your metaphorical prison and you're just thinking through all these things and you just start to wonder like, did I get it wrong? Have I wasted my entire life? Was following Jesus even worth it, or has it just brought me to this mess? I just kind of imagine like John's like thinking to himself, it's been all these years, from the time before he was born, he had one job, lead people and prepare people for the Messiah. And he's wondering, did I get it wrong? Did I mislead thousands of people? He's just sitting in his prison cell wondering, like, what did I do? And so I just imagine he asked this question, right? Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else? And he's genuinely asking because he's genuinely feeling, and he's even seen the miraculous. And in this moment, inside his prison cells, it's just human nature, where the walls start to close in on him and he starts to question what God is up to. And I just kind of imagine like the disciples are like, John, have you not heard all the things we've been telling you of all the amazing things that Jesus is doing? Of course he's the one. To which I would just imagine John being like, you just got to ask him. I just need to know. And I just imagine the disciples being like, John, you realize we're probably going to like have to interrupt a miracle just to ask Jesus this question. Like there's going to be someone getting healed. And we're going to be like, hang on a second, don't worry, he's got you. But Jesus, we come with a question from John. Are you God incarnate? Are you the Messiah? Are you the one? Right? Like, John, this is going to be awkward. To which I think John would just be like, I just need you to ask him. I just need you to ask him. Jesus replied, go back and report to John what you hear and what you see. Go back and report to John what you hear and see. And what he's saying by that is because John can't hear and John can't see. He's in the middle of his prison. He's in the midst of the storm. And you know that in the midst of the storm, you don't know what's going on beyond yourself. Do you ever notice that, by the way? You ever notice that when things aren't going well with you, you question God's existence? When things aren't going well with others, you tell them you'll pray for them. Anyone else notice that? And I'm putting myself in that category too, right? But like when things go bad for other people, when other people lose their job and they come to me, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll be praying for you, or let me pray for you right now. When I lose my job, or when I'm hurting, or I'm in a relationship issue, it's like thousands, in fact, millions of people have had the same struggle. I didn't doubt God when it happened to them, but when it happens to me, all of a sudden, I'm doubting it. That's just the reality that we all face. And it just kind of shows you, it's just the human condition, the human nature, the sin nature, the gravitational pull towards ourselves instead of others. And that's the reality we are in the prison moment where we feel like, I can't hear anything, I can't see what God's doing. Is he even real? Because he feels silent, absent, and I'm starting to think he's non-existent. And so Jesus says, go and tell him what you hear and see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor. But what's Jesus saying? He's saying, John, you didn't get it wrong, bud. You were bang on. That whenever people asked you, like, are you the one that's to come? Like, are you the Messiah? Because people would often think John the Baptist was the Messiah. And he's like, no, if you think I'm awesome, just wait. The one who's coming, he's coming with the Holy Spirit of God and fire. To which everyone's like, what's the fire part? Like, what does that mean? And can I tell you as a pastor, I don't have a clue, okay? All I know is fire consumes things. And so what it seemed to be is John saying, God's coming in the flesh. And when he gets a hold of you with his Holy Spirit, it consumes all of you. That's my best guess, okay? Some of you are like, I've never been fully consumed by God. Hey, prayer team's gonna be up at the front. They'd love to pray that over you this morning. You good with that? Okay, so you can line up all the way out the door. If you're just like, I just want God to consume me. I just have this like Sunday morning 1 hour and I have no other God in my life. We want God to consume every single part of you. So feel free to come up for prayer. So in that moment, John's in the prison, and he's like, I just promised these people that there was one coming who was just gonna save their people from their sins. He was gonna come with the power of God. He was gonna come like a fire, all consuming, just take over everything. He's like, and I'm starting to doubt that he's even real and he's the right guy. And Jesus sends the message back. He's like, John, everything you promised them is happening. Everything you promised is happening. To which you think like, that's great. But you kind of almost wish, like Jesus is talking to them, he's like, the dead are raised, the good news is proclaimed to the poor. Can you pass that message on to John? Come here. And tell him tonight to have his bags ready because I'm breaking him out. Can you imagine, right? Like, that's what he should have said, and that's what I'm expecting, and that's what John's expecting, and that's what everybody's expecting, right? Like, oh yeah, John, don't worry, I'm coming for you, buddy. But instead he's like, so yeah, just tell him, yep, no, don't worry, he didn't get it wrong. I am the one that is to come. Everything that you assumed was coming, is happening. Just remind him in his prison cell what's going on. That's anticlimactic. Just like, you just imagine this episode like, Jesus, you realize that your cousin is in prison right now, and he's questioning if God is real because you have not moved in his direction. Yes. And you realize that he's losing faith right now because of your act. Yes. And can you just imagine the tension in that moment? It's like, are you gonna do something about it? No. And in fact, this is the strange thing that Jesus says at the end. It's kind of cryptic, but it's awesome, okay? And this is so crucial. If you're not a note taker, write this down. Look what he says. Blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me. This is Jesus talking. Let me read that again. Blessed is anyone who doesn't stumble on account of me, to which I would be like, whoa, Jesus, hang on. You're telling me that it is possible to encounter you, to chat with you, to watch you, to be in your presence, and somehow that presence could lead me to the place where I could doubt your existence? Yeah, so you're blessed if you don't stumble and lose faith when you see the things that I do. What? Does anyone else think like, no. If I want my friends to believe, I just need to bring them to Jesus. If they could only see the wonderful things that Jesus does and the amazing way he teaches and the amazing miracles that he performs, then they would believe. Jesus is like, yeah, that's true too. But there are things that I will do as the creator of the universe that will not fit into your little box. And you will not understand them. And it will not be a neat little bow. And yet I am still who I said I am. I am still the Messiah. I am still the God of the universe. And John's still in prison. And then the disciples leave. And then something really interesting happens. As John's disciples were leaving, Jesus began to speak to the crowd about John. And he has a little bit of a word picture and some questions he asked the crowd. And this is what he lands with. The disciples are already gone back to tell John, hey, just don't stumble on account of him. What? Is this? Truly I tell you, among those born of women, that's everybody, in case you didn't catch that, there has not risen anyone greater than John the Baptist. John doesn't even get that message. Jesus didn't tell the disciples, oh, by the way, just tell them this. It didn't get to him. He told the crowd, but he didn't tell. And you just kind of, you read this story and it just leaves things uncomfortable. There's no neat bow. In fact, if you know the story, what happened to John the Baptist in the end? He got his head cut off. We have kids programs. Put your kids in the kids program. That's what happened. He chopped his head off. It's like, where's the happy ending? Christians love neat little bows on every story, right? And then we're going to show a video because it's awesome, because you were healed and they got better and the cancer left and they had kids. It's like, but you know that's not how life works. There are times where it just feels like God is silent, absent. You start to think he's non-existent because of your circumstance and everything going on. In the midst of this, we learn a bunch of things from this story that I want to highlight for you this morning. Here it is, 4 things. Number 1, even the greatest Jesus followers have dark times and doubt. Even the greatest Jesus followers, like John the Baptist, who Jesus said is the best among everyone, hit hard times and doubt and ask questions sometimes. And in fact, Jesus' announcement that John the Baptist is the best came after he heard that John was doubting. If you've struggled with doubt, if you've been insecure and wondered where is God, you're just joining the ranks of the best Jesus followers like John the Baptist. Be encouraged. Jesus can handle your doubt and your questions. In fact, the thing you got to do is you got to see, how does Jesus deal with doubt in the Bible? He doesn't always answer it. In fact, with John the Baptist, he kind of gives him a logical answer. But he doesn't always do that. There are other times like doubting Thomas, and what does Jesus do? He's like, hey, come here. Put your finger in the holes in my hands so you can see and believe. There are other times where people ask serious questions, and you know what Jesus does? He doesn't even answer them. He just cries, and he joins them in their pain. And I think as Christians, we just have this way of going about it that when someone is suffering, when our friends and family who are part of this church, who are not part of the church, are starting to question God and wonder, how can he be real when I can't have kids, or when my marriage just fell apart, or where is he? I was talking to someone this week, they're like, I'm not even sure if God's part of this. I'm angry at the universe, right? And like Christians, what do? We're like, you got to read this book by this guy named Ravi. Right? Like, it's just like, yeah, it's great. And sometimes logic is the thing. And sometimes they need to wrestle with the real questions. And other times we just need to sit down, hold them, and cry and be silent and do the opposite of what Job's friends did. That Jesus' response to people's doubt and to people's questioning and to people's pain is different every single time, and ours needs to be as well. That sometimes there aren't easy answers and there aren't bows that we can just place on top of it. And sometimes the only thing that we can do is sit in the pain, not knowing the answer. That John didn't know the answer. That no amount of prayer and faith seemed to solve this problem, and yet it did not mean that Jesus was not God and that God was not sitting on his throne controlling the world. Number 2, your circumstance is not evidence of how God feels about you. Some of you have been told your whole life, well, if that's happening, you must have done something wrong. That's karma. That's another religion. It's not Jesus following. It's a lie. That you will read story after story. John the Baptist is a great example of people going through very hard things, and it did not reflect the way that God viewed them. So this whole idea about, well, if you had just prayed more, if you had been better, if you had treated them nicer, then God would, that's not how God works. And so while there are times where I have no idea how to answer why things are happening the way they are, we can sit in my office and we can cry about it and I can listen to it, but I may not have an answer as to why it's happening. And you may never know until you meet Jesus and ask him, why did that happen? How did you let that go on? He can handle your doubt. He can handle your questions. He can handle you crying out to him. He's good with that. But we need to be able to take it to him. That's why your circumstance is not evidence of how God feels about you. You want to know how God feels about you, you look at the cross. You look at what Jesus did on the cross, that he gave his life That while we were still sinners, that while we didn't care, we were still happy to go our own way, God said, I'm willing to send my son to die in your place. That's why we gather. That's why we celebrate. That's why we sing, because the God of the universe was willing to come down, humble himself, and take our place, and die in our place. Number 3, God doesn't always send the help we desire, and there isn't always a neat bow. This is the reality. Do I believe in praying for healing? Yes. Do I believe in praying for wombs to be opened and children to be born? Yes. I'd be happy to do it for you today in the atrium. If you want prayer, we love to pray here at Lakeside, and we love sharing stories of God doing incredible things. I love getting emails. I love getting emails from people who say, this is what God's doing in my life. This is how he answered prayer. We believe in the supernatural. We believe that God does incredible things. We also believe that there are sometimes these prison moments where we don't quite understand what's happening. And there are times where God doesn't send the help that we desire. And there isn't a neat bow at the end of the story. John the Baptist teaches us that. It's not reflective of who God is or what he's doing. Here's the last point. God's lack of cooperation is not an argument for or against his existence, okay? Let me say this again. God's lack of cooperation is not an argument for or against his existence. That's just logic, okay? If you could argue that someone doesn't exist because they don't cooperate, I wouldn't exist half the time in my marriage, okay? It's just how things go, okay? The reality is that someone not cooperating, you can't just be like, well, you don't exist because you're not doing things the way I like. It's like we put God in this box and think, well, unless he does things exactly the way I want, then he cannot be real. That's why I love the Bible. It's a real document. And you read it and you say, I resonate with John the Baptist. And Jesus is like, yeah, and he's the greatest. And I'm still God, and I'm still good, and that still makes no sense. There are times where following Jesus, we will not be able to put clean bows on it. We will not be able to make sense of it. But in those moments, that's where we need to learn how to hear and see what God is doing. Let me summarize the message before I close. Following the creator of the universe will inevitably lead us places we never expected to go. It's going to be a roller coaster ride. We talked about that at the beginning of the Follow Me series. There's no greater adventure than following Jesus. And at times, places we don't want to go. In those moments, Jesus' followers seek to hear and see past their prison walls. To which you say, how do I see past my prison walls? And I'm just going to invite the band to come up, and we're going to sing in response in a moment. But this is what I want to leave you with. The reality is there are people in this room right now who are in prison wall kind of moments. All you see and all you feel is the life-threatening situation that you're in, that your family member's in, the devastating news that you got that children will never come your way, the news that you're not going to that school, the news that you didn't get that job, or the feeling that you feel you're always going to have that job, or that you're stuck in that marriage, you're never going to get married, or your kids will never talk to you, or you're going to be alone at Christmas. You have all these situations where you just can't even get past these prison walls. And I'm aware that's not just non-Christians, that's Jesus people too. Like John the Baptist felt that way, and we do too. It happens often. And the reality is there's people that you know who are outside this building who aren't Jesus followers, or who were Jesus followers, who had something happen in a church, maybe this church, that put them in a metaphorical prison that made them start to wonder, is God even real? We must be the kind of people who regularly posture and position ourselves to hear and to see what God is doing. And the one way that I want to talk about today, we're going to talk a lot more in September about how we help others do this. But one of the greatest things that you can do is say to yourself, I am going to regularly be part of a community that can hear and see what God is doing outside of my prison walls. For some of you, that's your community group. I want to suggest that every single one of us, it's our Sunday gatherings. If this is your church, would you just make it your commitment? Every week, no matter how I feel, no matter what's going on, no matter how tight the prison walls are getting, I'm going to step out of my prison and hear and see. You can come in here and you're like, I don't even have the energy to stand up. And you just let the words of other people declaring how good God is and the stories that we tell of the people who've seen God work be the reminders as they were for John the Baptist to continue to endure in the midst of the dark times where there is no answer, where it does feel like God is silent, absent, and potentially non-existent. And we're going to do that right now as the band leads us in songs. that we're going to be reminded by the words of this song how beautiful God is and the incredible things that he has done. And so I want to invite you to stand, and the band's going to lead us. And this is just one of the ways that we hear and see what God is up to in the world and are reminded in the midst of our prison walls. Just before you sit down, I don't know about you, but is that not a heavy story? Does it not feel like, great, I brought a friend and they pretty much think if they follow Jesus, they're going to get their head chopped off? Doesn't sit well. Yet the amazing thing is that 2,000 years ago, Jesus is hanging on a cross and everybody's thinking, what a liar. Where's God now? And they actually mocked him. If you're God, get yourself off the cross. And in that moment, to all of Jesus' followers, it seemed like he was silent, absent, and maybe not even existent. And yet, because of what happened on the cross, and because of what God was doing, which didn't fit into anybody's box at the time, people have been finding freedom in Jesus for 2,000 years. Can I just bless you that the same resurrection power that rose Jesus from the dead would reside on you this week in the midst of all the things that you're going through, in the midst of the darkness, in the midst of the prison cell, in the midst of all the different things that you're going on with. I just want to bless you with that power and that presence of Jesus, that you may know what he is up to, that you may be blessed with people around you who can tell you that you would hear and see what God is up to. I want to remind you again that if you're in the midst of any prison, big or small, our prayer team would love to pray for that or anything else up at the front. Have a fantastic week. We'll see you next week.